In the distant reaches of space, Sergeant Jonas Mercer didn't flinch as Lieutenant Nia Rivera lectured him about the alien prisoner. He was too busy sewing a tiny custom patch onto what used to be an alien war cloak, and was now a makeshift coat for his six-limbed bioluminescent pet with snapping mandibles. The rest of the barracks called the creature Nightmare Pup, but Jonas called it Pixel. He was cold, Jonas replied flatly, pulling thread tight with his teeth, and hungry. He also hasn't tried to eat anyone in 3 days. That's progress. Lieutenant Rivera, who had personally authorized 4 airstrikes in the last week, looked at the aliens sitting in the corner of the bunker, gnawing on what used to be a combat boot. She pinched the bridge of her nose. It decapitated Corporal. Lee yelled first. Loud noises stress him out. Him, you gave it a gender. Jonas shrugged. Can't just call him it forever. That's rude. The war had been going for 6 standard years. Humans called it the Rift Conflict. The aliens, Zephyrite from the Silver Spiral, called it the Cleansing. Everyone had different branding, but the situation was simple. The Zephyrite believed humanity's unpredictability and tendency to domesticate wild animals and weaponize anything made them an existential threat. Humanity, in turn, didn't take kindly to being told they were subsentient slime that needed to be sanitized. At first, the war went as wars always did, poorly and with lots of explosions. Human colonies on the outer rim were glassed. The Zephyrite lost half their supply lines to sabotage from humans who rigged shipping crates with laughing gas and rabid squirrels. It was chaos. Then came the turning point, the Battle of Nova 7, where a platoon of humans adopted an entire battalion of Zephyrite, deserters after discovering they were just bureaucratic interns who got conscripted by accident. That was the start of the weird phase of the war. The adoption doctrine, as it became known in human command circles, wasn't official policy, but it might as well have been. Instead of executing prisoners, squads began returning with former enemies, now given nicknames, translated manuals, and matching unit patches. Some of the more expressive ones even got therapy dogs. The Zephyrite couldn't understand it. They thrived on hierarchy and fear, enforced loyalty through chemical conditioning and ritual punishments. The idea that humans were not only refusing to retaliate, but actively inviting the enemy into their ranks sent their generals into a frenzy of strategic recalculations. Back in the bunker, Pixel had managed to chew through his boot and was now licking the condensation off the ventilation pipe. Jonas glanced up and tossed him a ration bar. "Don't reward it," Rivera muttered, but without conviction. Pixel caught the bar mid-air with a satisfying chomp and made a series of warbling noises that, according to the latest translation logs, might have meant either "thank you" or "I will bite your kneecaps later." Nobody could tell. "Sir," said Jonas, "remember what happened with the spine crunchers on Helios 2? I adopted a pack of them. I remember they mauled half the mess hall and then defended the entire outpost from a Zephyrite. Stealth squad. Point is, sometimes an enemy is just someone who hasn't had a sandwich and a nap yet." "Jonas," Rivera said, "that thing has acid spit." Jonas tapped a metal canteen on his belt. "Neutralized with bicarbonate mix. We figured it out after he melted Private Chen's socks. That's why everyone wears the rubber ones now." "You're all insane. We're adaptable." Outside, the sound of engines filled the air. Dropships. A Zephyrite scouting unit was approaching, probably to test the human supply routes. Rivera stepped out, pulling up her visor, scanning the sky with military precision. Jonas didn't move. He was tying a second patch to Pixel's side, a crude smiley face stitched with fluorescent green thread. Rivera's comm crackled. "Lieutenant, incoming Zephyrite raiders, 4 clicks east." "Copy that," Rivera replied. "Prepare defenses. Do not attempt contact or detainment. These are not deserters." Jonas stood up and cracked his neck. Pixel skittered too, his side chittering like a demented blender. Jonas gave him a firm pat. "Ready, buddy? Remember, only bite if they fire first." What do you mean, if they fire first? Rivera shouted, but Jonas was already out the door. The thing about human soldiers, the Zephyrite would later note in a captured intelligence brief, wasn't just that they fought dirty or that they laughed during firefights. It wasn't even their strange obsession with snacks or their tendency to play music over loudspeakers during orbital bombardments. It was that they didn't treat you like an enemy. They treated you like a project. And projects, in the hands of humans, got completed. Back at the front lines, the Zephyrite scouts were advancing in a wedge formation, silent, precise, and lethal, until Pixel sprinted into the middle of them with a squeal, tail appendages, wiggling and knocked over their heavy weapons unit with what could only be described as joyful violence. The scouts paused. The humans opened fire. Pixel, now wearing a tiny helmet with a scribbled-on skull, let out a scream that echoed across the field like a war horn forged from nightmares and bubble wrap. It was not a noble sound, but it worked. The Zephyrite scattered. Jonas advanced, flanked by 4 other soldiers and 2 more adopted aliens, including a feathered amphibian named Whistle and a massive bipedal bruiser, everyone just called Big Red. The skirmish was over in minutes. One of the Zephyrite, wounded but breathing, tried to crawl away. Jonas knelt next to him, rifle slung behind his back, and offered him a water pouch. The Zephyrite bared his fangs. "Yeah, I get it," Jonas said. "I wouldn't trust me either." Pixel padded over, sniffed the alien's face, then plopped down beside him and began licking his antenna. The Zephyrite froze. Jonas leaned closer. "Just so you know, once he starts licking you, it's over. You're part of the squad." The Zephyrite stared. Up at the human, chest heaving, Jonas smiled. "Don't worry, we'll find you a patch." The Zephyrite soldier's name turned out to be something unpronounceable, involving 3 clicks, a hum, and what sounded like a burp. Jonas named him Zane. Zane didn't resist much after the licking. He got a patch the next day, just a red Z made, of duct tape stuck onto his shoulder, and a bunk in the corner next to Big Red, who snored like a cement mixer full of marbles. Zane still hissed sometimes, especially when the humans passed him a spoon too quickly, but he no longer flinched. When Pixel curled up beside him at night, mandibles twitching contentedly, back at HQ, this was becoming a problem. General Vaughn stood over a holographic map of Sector 19A, scowling. "I want reports on these adoptions now. We've got frontline squads requesting enemy language textbooks and pet harnesses instead of ammo." "Captain." Harlow cleared his throat. "Sir, the 91st successfully held the Ashen Fields against 2 Zephyrite divisions using just 12 humans, 4 ex-enemy aliens, and a golden retriever named Captain Pancakes." "Captain Pancakes? Technically honorary, sir." Vaughn stared. "And this worked?" "They claimed the enemies mistook Pancake's fur as some kind of divine omen. The Zephyrite dropped their weapons and started chanting." Vaughn rubbed his temples. "Fine. Get me a psychological breakdown. I want to know why this works. Why are aliens responding to being adopted instead of annihilated?" Meanwhile, at Outpost Echo 9, adoption rates were accelerating. Private Lin, previously a demolition specialist, now ran Integration Hour twice a week, which involved sitting captured Zephyrite in a circle while Pixel demonstrated acceptable social behaviors. "No dismemberment," Lin would chant while waving cue cards. "Good." Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it ended with someone needing a new kneecap. But progress was progress. Jonas had become something of a folk hero. Other squads started calling him the Whisperer, though never to his face. Rumor had it he'd tamed a 10-foot silver spiral death mantis with peanut butter. This wasn't true. It had been almond butter. The death mantis was now on perimeter duty and went by Chopper. Still, not everyone was thrilled. Sergeant Mako, Jonas's old rival from the 6th Battalion, dropped by Echo 9 under the guise of transferring equipment. In reality, he came to watch the circus. "You've turned war into a daycare," Mako scoffed, as a feathered alien passed them carrying a crate of solar batteries. "It's a tactical foster program," Jonas replied. "We raise them right. They stop trying to eat our spleens." Mako squinted at Zane, who was trying to teach himself Uno. "You ever think they're playing along, waiting for the right moment to strike?" Jonas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned toward a collection of drawings on the wall, crude crayon portraits of every human in the unit, made by their alien recruits. Zane's was particularly haunting, drawn entirely in black with no visible face. Jonas loved it. "They're not pretending," he said. "You can't fake trauma, and you can't fake healing from it." Mako shook his head. "You're betting the war on friendship." "Bracelets? No," Jonas said. "I'm betting it on second chances." Before Mako could respond, the base alarm blared. "Breach! North wall! Multiple life forms approaching fast." Jonas was already moving. Pixel dashed ahead, tail blades twitching with excitement. Zane grabbed his borrowed rifle, he still wasn't allowed to load it, and followed. Chopper roared from the watchtower, then disappeared over the edge like a hairy missile. They weren't expecting a full Zephyrite assault, not this deep into territory, where humans had solid supply lines and the terrain favored guerrilla tactics. But the swarm that burst from the trees was organized, methodical. No screams, no fear, just cold silence and glowing blades. Mako swore and ducked behind the barricade. "Looks like your pet therapy failed," Jonas fired back. "Looks like yours never started." The squad split and flanked, but the attackers didn't break formation. They were different, controlled, not like the frightened conscripts Jonas had learned to read, to comfort, to turn. These moved with precision, like they'd been trained specifically to resist humanity's strangest weapon, empathy. A figure stepped forward, larger than the others, adorned in ceremonial armor that shimmered with heat. His voice echoed through a throat amplifier. "You shame the spiral. You let your minds be contaminated by these soft-blooded creatures. You are not Zephyrite. You are waste." Jonas recognized the voice. High Marshal Krell, the one who'd ordered. The initial strike on Earth colonies, the one whose doctrine forbade mercy and called surrender a species-deep betrayal. Krell raised a staff tipped with what looked like a fossilized skull. "You have 40 of our own within your walls. They are to be returned. We will cleanse them properly." Jonas stepped forward. Pixel stood beside him, tail raised. "You want your people back?" Jonas shouted. "Then stop sending them broken," Krell sneered. "You poisoned their loyalty. You infected them with weakness." Jonas shrugged. "We call it hope." Krell pointed the staff forward. "Burn it all." The Zephyrites charged. The defense was brutal. Echo 9 didn't have heavy artillery, just standard rifles, a few pulse turrets, and a weirdly large number of zip ties. Zane grabbed a pipe and clocked an attacker mid-leap. Pixel tackled another into a trench. Chopper barreled through the line, scattering foes like twigs in a storm. But the Zephyrites weren't trying to win by brute force. They were trying to retrieve. Inside the chaos, Jonas noticed 2 attackers trying to drag one of their own out of the mess hall. Whistle, his feathers matted with soup and confusion. Jonas intercepted them with a flying kick and pulled Whistle back, roaring something that vaguely resembled mine. Rivera arrived with backup, late as usual, and stared at the mess. "Are those attackers trying to rescue our adopted ones?" "Yeah," Jonas shouted. "Turns out adoption's a bigger threat than we thought." The attack ended with retreat. The Zephyrites didn't expect resistance to be so emotional. One of the attackers, wounded and pinned under a generator, hissed at Jonas as he approached. "You make them forget what they are." "No," Jonas said, binding the Zephyrite's injury. "We make them remember what they could be." As the night settled, The base counted losses. 2 wounded, 1 solar panel destroyed, and 1 case of mashed potatoes spilled across the command desk. Zane stood quietly next to Whistle, watching as Rivera paced and ranted about new security measures and reinforced fences. Pixel licked Jonas's boot. "You think they'll come back?" Zane asked in broken English. Jonas nodded. "Yeah, probably, with more speeches and less subtlety." Zane glanced at the empty sky. "Then what do we do?" Jonas scratched behind Pixel's antenna. "We patch them up. We give them a bunk. We figure out what kind of nickname Tarkin shortens to." Zane was quiet then. "Tarry?" Jonas grinned. "Perfect." 2 weeks later, the Zephyrite sent a ship, not a fleet, not a stealth cruiser, but a single vessel. It descended into Sector 19A's atmosphere with the elegance of a rusted anvil, crashing just outside Echo 9's perimeter with enough force to knock over the comms tower and send Big Red face first into a barrel of pickles. The humans, veterans of chaos by now, responded with a mix of curiosity, dread, and the routine deployment of biscuits as peace offerings. Out from the smoke walked Krell. No honor guard, no weapons, just him. Jonas, flanked by Rivera, Pixel, Zane, and a very confused Captain Pancakes, met him at the crater's edge. "I have not come to negotiate," Krell said. "Then you're going to be really disappointed by the cookie tray," Jonas replied. Krell ignored the tray. "I have come to witness, to understand, before I order this sector burned from orbit," Pixel hissed. Jonas raised a brow. "You sure you want to do that in person?" The Marshal stepped forward, face unreadable. "These soldiers, my soldiers, have chosen your side. I do not believe it is weakness. I believe it is delusion. I intend to see it for myself," and he did. He watched Chopper nap beside the generator he once tried to destroy. He saw Zane play cards with Private Lynn and lose spectacularly. He followed Big Red, who now watered a cactus garden behind the barracks. He observed Whistle participating in poetry readings. He even witnessed a pillow fight started by Pixel, ended by Rivera's accidental backflip through a folding chair. He said nothing for 3 days. He observed. On the 4th, he found Jonas alone at the Overlook, eating cold noodles from a ration. "A cup. You do not punish them," Krell said. "They've already been punished," Jonas replied. "By war, by fear, by leaders who said they didn't have a choice. We're just giving them new ones." Grell's gaze followed a patrol of mixed-species soldiers below. "You are unstructured, chaotic. You defy logic." "Exactly," Jonas said. "And that's why you're winning." The Marshal turned, eyes narrowed. "Because you turn enemies into family?" "Because we don't see the difference." Silence, then Krell asked, "What do you see when you look at me?" Jonas slurped a noodle. "Someone who came all this way because a part of him wanted to be wrong." That night, Krell stood in the courtyard. He summoned the remaining Zephyrites under his command, those not yet captured, converted, or confused into submission. He looked out over the hybrid unit, the mismatched armor, the graffiti-covered bunkers, and the therapy goat named Sparkplug. "I came to understand what makes humans dangerous," he said. The Zephyrite stood still. Even Pixel paused mid-lick. "It is not their weapons, not their numbers, not their madness." He glanced at Jonas. "It is their refusal to let you stay broken." No one moved. Then Zane let out a warble that might have meant preach or I forgot my laundry. Either way, it was enough to break the silence. Krell dropped his staff. The war didn't end that day. Wars never do in one moment. But something cracked. A week later, the Zephyrite Council received a message from Krell. "Cease hostilities in Sector 19A. Commence cultural research initiative. Include biscuits." Jonas received a new bunkmate the next morning. A quiet Zephyrite, with a missing eye and a lot of questions. They called him Cyclone. He made great soup. Rivera requested transfer to a quieter post. Pixel was promoted to morale enforcer. And Jonas? He kept a spare patch in his pocket, just in case someone else showed up needing a name, a place, and maybe eventually a hug.